Morning, guys.
Rachael, Easy, how are we? What was that?
I have no idea. I'm still trying to figure that out.
It's early.
Well,
It's
Eric,
very early.
would you consider yourself a morning person or a night owl?
Oh, absolutely a night owl. Absolutely a night owl. Although I do I find it very hard. Like I don't set workouts for myself in the morning because they just don't happen. I know people are like, set the routine, get up and that, but when it comes to like getting up for a swim and stuff, which will start this week, but getting up at 6 o'clock, my brain always finds every reason to go, I'll just go back to sleep. It's fine. So I think I'm more of an evening person. I think I train at 11 o'clock at night as opposed to 6 o'clock in the morning.
I think me and Rachael agree with you because you kept us waiting for good 10, 15 minutes on this 7:30 in the morning podcast because we are late getting this podcast out to people on a Monday morning. And not only we're late getting this podcast out, it's a very special podcast this week. This is our 100th episode of the Any Given Runday podcast. You can tell my coffee's kicked in already. I'm good to go.
I was going to use the quote from the Queen Bohemian Rhapsody film. I'm a performer, darling, not a Russian time conductor. Train conductor. Is Anyway, yes, I was late because, he wanted me to get up early. So my brain...
No. That's a bit of a lie.
Rachel,
hit the intro music quick before I prove wrong. Hit the intro music.
Let's go. Lot of dodges, another bullet as we enter the 100th episode of the Any Given Runday podcast. Guys, thank you very much for listening to. I'm going to assume you're listening now. You've listened to all previous 99 episodes. So thank you for listening. Seriously, though, actually, thank you for listening to the podcast and then get as far as 100 episodes of the podcast. And it is very early in the Monday morning, but it's not that early where Rachael is in Australia. So, Rachael, I'm putting it straight on to you right now. What do we have in store for this week's episode of the Any Given Runday podcast?
Well, Seán, we are going to jump straight back to you because we have something big to celebrate. Not only did we reach 100 episodes, but Seán also smashed his PB. So I'm sure a lot of you would have seen that during the week on Instagram. We shared it. Seán, what was it, 75 seconds you knocked off your 5K time?
Roughly 75 seconds, yeah. I went from 21:55 down to 20:40. And I was, so in Clane, it was absolutely the heavens just opened for the run. It was just absolutely horrific weather. But I don't know about you guys, but maybe because I keep bringing up in the podcast, stuff like that, but I was really, really nervous about this one. Just because we'd done a podcast yourself, Rachael, a couple of weeks ago, where it was like, get a 5K PB guaranteed. And I'm like, I'm kind of after telling people guaranteed 5K PB and all the rest. So I was like, I'm not putting a lot of pressure on myself. And just because I'm, helping run the run club, I think there's a certain standard. And at the end of the day, by the way, none of this matters. Like I've been in races where I've failed before and absolutely nothing said or anything like that's happened. But I just seem to put all this kind of pressure and stuff myself. So I was like raring to go. So I was one of the few idiots in the t-shirt and shorts right before the race being like, right, let's go. Everyone else got like 3-4 layers and a hat on. So I knew like a kilometer or 2 kilometers in, if I wore an extra layer, I'd be way too warm. But took your advice, Rachael, which was, I think we spoke before in the podcast, but if not, Rachel's advice was go hard for the first kilometer, like set a race tempo, what you think you might get. So I set out for a 4-minute kilometer just to see where I'd be at after the crowds and stuff, and then kind of settle in for the next 3 and then go for a push at the end. So I tried to settle in for the second kilometer. I ended up going a little bit faster. I'm like, I may as well try and keep this going. And then same third, I was around 4:06. And then after that, then I was like, okay, the wheels are starting to fall off. But I knew the route so well. I'd actually ran the route that morning, just kind of, I'm a big fan of visualizing stuff. So we'd ran that route constantly. So I was like, okay, you've got a certain bit to this distance, and then here comes a Tesco here, you're back to Woods here, and just keep going. By the last kilometer, I was dead on my feet. The breathing was going pretty heavy, but I was like, right, one more. And that's when the mind started messing me. Like, Seán, you've got the PB, just relax, just kick in. I'm like, no, a little bit faster. I'm like, no, Seán, you've got the PB. Try and pull back so you don't get an injury at the end. But I managed to shut that guy in my head down. I just try and keep going. My last lap was the slowest at a 4:14, but that's pretty feckin' fast for me and no injuries. Past the finish line at 20:40, I was delighted, but like that, I hate 5Ks just because I feel like getting sick and just that kind of, it feels like an all-out sprint. Unfortunately for me, as soon as I passed the finish line, I probably shouldn't be saying this in the podcast, but hey, I do be honest, and that's how it happened. I was that dead. I just happened to cop the boss man who runs ABC gyms like right in front of me. And he was closer to me than the nearest tree or the nearest wall was, or like the ground, which was soaking wet. So like I literally collapsed into his arms. It was like just wrapped around his waist, being like, just hold me up. I barely got those words out, just hold me up. I just couldn't speak for the next 30, 40 seconds. I was like, uh-oh. But I eventually got my breath back, and then, just seeing other people cross the finish line and all the rest. It was, despite the weather, it was a class atmosphere. Just really good to get back into events and stuff like that again. So, long story short, smashed the 5K PB. Really happy about it. Have other challenges set based off that already. And, I'm delighted to actually talk on the podcast about an event that went really, really well for me. It feels good.
So we're 100 episodes in, and we've just found out that you were soft all this time and you finally did it.
That's it. You're not wrong. I put it down to the new American socks I got for the new Rocky 4 socks. That's got me through it.
I mean, that is the truth, though. It is a mental game, especially 5K. But that's why you talked, like what we were kind of chatting about beforehand was kind of that plan. I'm such a big believer in going for even splits in the 5K. So for anyone who doesn't know what that means you try and hit every kilometer at the same pace. But then you have to consider like your nervous energy at the start. It's so hard to contain that, especially when that gun goes and everyone is going mad dash. So that's why you want to aim for almost the same, but your first kilometer is always going to be quicker. So it's so important that you hold yourself back. And like 5Ks, if you're going for that even split, you should feel like you are going way too easy. Like when you hit the first kilometer, you should be like, okay, this doesn't feel too hard. Maybe I'm not going hard enough, but you need to trust yourself. You can't panic at that stage if it feels too easy, because by the time you hit the last kilometer, Seán, that shows you left everything out there. Because even though you're going very similar pace to the other 4 kilometers, it feels so much worse.
Yeah.
And that's just such the beauty about 5K. Going the same speed, more or less, for all 5, but every kilometer feels like a different experience. And it's just such an amazing race.
Yeah,
I agree.
I'm not a fan of the short stuff. I'm not going to lie. Like, I don't know what it is for me. Like, I'll go out or think back to when I did the run there. I swore to Seán, never again. I said I would never, ever do this crap again. But it was like, I tried it a couple of times and I missed out by a couple of seconds on the sub 20 and wondered if I could. And then one day I got really angry and did it. But every time it was like 2.8 kilometers in, I'd start to go, uh-oh. It's just like, oh my God. And then the next time it was like 2.9 kilometers in. I was like, how am I going to hold on for 2 kilometers? Like that 3 kilometer mark was when my body just started screaming. And those last 2 kilometers, even though they were 8 minutes, felt like an eternity. What did you think, Seán? What was that point?
The 4th to 5th kilometer, especially because when I passed the finish line for the 5K, it was actually my 3rd time passing the finish line because it was a 2.5 loop. So I was like, my God, this feels like forever. But yeah, no, the 5K, even though I was only going a small bit slower, I felt like I was going a lot slower. I was just like, just get there. And like I turned the corner into the main street. You could see the finish line at the end. And I could actually see the clock just tick 20. I'm like, oh, I was pretty close. But then I realized it was still a good 40 seconds. It must be a big clock, like I see it from that distance. But the last kilometer, there was a few times where I did feel like if there was a bush nearby, I would just jump into it and forget about it. Like it's a horrific feeling. That kind of it is and it is an horrific feeling, because it's a good feeling in one respect. You are pushing yourself to the absolute limit. You're putting everything into it. But then when you feel like getting sick and stuff, that's not a good feeling. But just getting to that point, and I'd always struggle with you trying to keep my that level up for so long. And I know I always go back to little injuries and stuff I had, but that this time, like, I would have worked with Rachael a fair bit around week 2, week 3, week 4, when I was trying to get my tempos up, and the old injuries from stupid training in my past, but going too hard, too fast in every single fucking run, start creeping up again. So with Rachael, we started doing the intervals she'd planned for me. We started doing a lot of them in the airdyne bike. So the impact wasn't there in the calves and Achilles. So like for week 3, week 4, week 5, and you can even, like, we're going back to Rachael put up a post on the Instagram stories about who did the most mileage and stuff, and mine was the lowest. But if you see, my bike was really high, and probably the highest I've ever done on Strava, because I started doing a lot more on the bike, trying to mimic. Now, you're not going to get the exact same as running, but trying to mimic the heart rate as much as I could to push myself to, okay, like, you're working near your threshold pace for X amount of time here, and that definitely helped big time when it came to the race, trying to just keep going. So I've done 4K. We've talked before in the podcast plenty of times with the 5K challenges. I've gotten the 3-4. I've stopped after 4 and found that bush and be like, thank you, and just lay down in the grass and went, not today. Obviously, it wasn't pissing rain that day, but like, that has happened to me before. So because you're not going to say it, Rach, props to you and your program for help getting me there towards that threshold to be able to keep going over that 5K without actually getting sick of my boss man. So thanks for that.
But we did talk about that when we started off on this 5K journey. Well, it's probably 7 weeks ago now. So anyone who wants to go back and listen to that, if you're interested in, potentially hitting a 5K and just want a 6-week primer, go back and listen to that episode. Because even though, Seán, you were saying how we switched some of the intervals onto the bike, we actually talked about that before you ever did the race, because you are training for this adventure race in Glendalough. And Quest. You need to be able, the Quest Glendalough. So we had talked about incorporating some bike sessions. And like you talked about that challenge we did, or who did the most mileage in January. Like, there was a time when I was doing 100 kilometers a week. And in January, I barely hit 100 kilometers for the month. And it was probably my biggest month in months, because I do a lot on the bike. And I feel like I can run better because I'm getting the aerobic workout, but my body is just not dead. Like, I just can't. I couldn't do a 100 kilometer week. I would be in bits. I don't think I could do a 50 kilometer week, but I can do it on the bike, so I can still get my aerobic workout. So, that's why having a personalized plan is so great, because you can say, well, look, I do have this injury. If I run X amount of times per week, or try to, I'm fatigued, I'm breaking down. What can I do to substitute it? We would say, well, you can adapt this session on the bike. So instead of going out for your 3 by 10 minute tempo, do your 3 by 10 minutes on the bike. Obviously, you just do a longer warm up, longer cool down than you would if you're running. But that's just a very simple transfer over.
100%.
It's just the basis for triathlon training, which you know all about, Eric.
Yeah, it's. I have to say, I'd be like that when we go back a year, Seán. We remember the amount of miles we were putting in, and or even 2 years to 2019 marathon, we were working very hard with the mileage. But I think I did, and I think what caused this foundation for me was in 2019 was the year I started getting in and conquering the fears of water and getting into triathlon, and my marathon time was absolutely amazing. But in my last 7 weeks before the marathon, like that, my knees were giving me trouble because I went back road running. I went back to the mentality of I need to hit X amount of miles or else I won't be able to do a marathon. And the only thing I was able to really do in the build-up was cycling, and came out with a 3:35, which in my head I'd no right to do because I hadn't been running 400 miles a week to be able to run the marathon. So it's definitely made a big difference. And I suppose I was lucky in the sense that I was in the heart rate training and just learning that, okay, I just need to keep my heart rate around the 140, 150. And when I'm on the bike, getting into little sprints just to raise it up again and bringing it back down and doing that for a duration, because okay, the body is very intelligent. It knows when it's running, it knows when it's cycling. But if you can train the heart to kind of trick it into just exercising in a certain zone and building the endurance, burning your fat element instead of your sugar element, and that's what makes the difference. So it's absolutely brilliant. And obviously running marathons is tough on the joints, and running long distance is tough. So cycling is and swimming definitely takes a bit of weight off and changes it up a little bit. So it's nice aerobic training with not too much stress and fatigue on the joints, which is a big one for the long distance. But I'm raging now you gave Seán the secret, because I had him there. Now I'm worried about this marathon.
Well, I finally got out of my old habits of every 5K or 10K trying to be a bit fastest. But I still talk to people to this day about, like even recently, someone's asked me my 5K training plan, because I would have went around the gym that, I got a PB, and he's asked me training. I was like, a lot of times on the bike. He was like, why the bike? And I was telling him, and he was like, well, funny you should say that, because during lockdown, I was going out doing runs, and this is a very fit individual. We're doing a lot of rugby training, big lad, athletic guy. And he was saying that, like, it's only a run. So we go out, do a 5K as fast as you can, and next day do a 10K as fast as you can, and try and, get as faster. And stress factors in the feet. And he was like, running, rugby and all the rest, getting tackled by guys 3 times the size. Not that bad at all, not that sore. But he'd wake up the next day after doing a hard run, and he'd be like, why am I sore? And it just goes back to, unfortunately for me, what we talked about in the very early days of the podcast, just bringing a full loop of doing 100 episodes. Eric was the big one in heart rate training, and I was trying to get more into the, I hate to say the word, but CrossFit endurance, where you do that kind of faster runs as fast as you can, not as many runs, but each run would count in terms of faster, and then pull back on and then do your strength training and stuff to try and balance it out. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't work for everyone, but I know for sure that doesn't work for me, and I don't think it works for a lot of people, just because of the amount of people I would have talked to during the first lockdown that would have suffered their injuries. I think slow, steady progress, like you're hitting at there, Rachael, just slowly building up that mileage and throwing in some different cross training, I suppose, for lack of a better word, on that one as well.
Yeah, and there's different ways of doing it. So like if you're training for triathlon specifically, you might do a lot of your endurance stuff on the bike and then do your interval workouts like running. But then if you're prone to injury, you'd maybe go for a few easy runs and then do most of your intervals on the bike. So it really depends on what the focus is and what your background is in terms of injuries and just how well you pull up from training, because like everyone's body is different. But lads, like if you want proof that triathlon training is so good for running, like we're just going to go to the extreme, to the current Olympic champion, Christian Blumenfeld. So he won the Olympics 2021 and then went on to smash the Ironman world record in the same year. So what's that? You're not doubling the distance, you're like tripling it almost, from Olympic distance up to Ironman. Do you want to know what he did the marathon at the end of the Ironman in?
Oh, I don't even want to know. I'm going to get sick of myself.
Yeah, Eric, I'm going to let you take this one, Eric, because
I'd say he probably did it in probably near top standard time. So somewhere just over the 2 hours, 2:15, maybe 2:20.
He was, well, bear in mind, it was 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 81% humidity. So don't know what, have to Google what 81 Fahrenheit is, but that's hot.
It's in the 20s. In the 20s anyway.
Yeah, and 81% humidity. He did a 2:35 marathon at the end of what? Almost a 4K
swim, 180
kilometer bike, and then he chucked out a 2:35 marathon. And like when you're trying to fit in the swimming and like building up the bike distance to 180 kilometers, you're not just focusing on your running. So like,
yeah,
I mean, I did say that was top end.
yeah.
Seán was just kind of frozen in spot there. But like it is true. If you take any of the triathlon guys, some of them like have seriously good 5K, 10K times. And it's purely from triathlon training. They don't do as much running as normal track athletes would, but yet they can turn out times that are very competitive with top athletes. And it is purely from triathlon training.
Yeah, it is good. Like is amazing. Like even on Saturday was my longest training day to date. It sounds mad. I'm only 4 weeks in. I'm like, oh my God, this is getting really long. But I did a 2-hour cycle and then went for a 5K tempo. Just to see, I was actually testing the bike position. I got kind of fitted to the bike, so I'm seated in the bike in a position for Ironman distance or full distance triathlon where you're not activating your glutes when you're cycling, so that you have power in the glutes to run when you get off the bike. But so the only way I could try that was go moderately quick and see how the legs felt. And absolutely amazingly, it was like I was just starting a new day after 2 hours on the bike. Now, obviously, endurance elements and energy sources were obviously depleted, but the muscles were fine. But it was amazing to be able to get off a bike for 2 hours and run then a 5K at a 4:30. Which felt comfortable, even though I haven't ran a 4:30 this year yet. It was the first time I did it, but all felt very comfortable and natural. So it is amazing, I suppose, how much you push yourself, and then by using different muscles, how you're able to still do it. Like it's very, very interesting in the effort people go through to do these races. But obviously just the volume of training, it's obviously not all on the road, but it's still a serious volume of training each week.
Very good. I did a lot of that with the guys I was training with leading up to the triathlon I did in Westport last September. A lot of those kind of back-to-back swim cycle runs. You're not going at the intensity, but again, that whole training the muscles to go straight off the bike into the run. That's, anyone who's interested, is known as a brick run, where you put two different sports back-to-back, not just brick run, a brick session. So you either go swim straight to bike to run, swim to run, something like that. Getting the muscles used to going straight from one to the other. It's just really interesting because we've always talked, like, a lot of people who run just consider themselves runners. I'm a runner. I can't cycle because it's not running. I can't swim because it's not running. But I think it is good to be open to the other things, especially if you're injury prone and things like that. And I mean, Seán, going back to your incredible run last week, you're just proof of that.
You're making me blush now on a podcast, Rachael. I do have to point something out because we did put it on the Instagram yesterday. We're talking about, just pulling back on runs and cycles and stuff and how everything can go together. I did do 30k run yesterday just because I'm trying to build up the endurance for the legs for a certain challenge I've got in 11 days time as we record this episode of the podcast. So once again, I've turned into a complete hypocrite and have tried to up my mileage. Now, actually, to your point, I am trying to do a bit of brick running because I do have quests coming up. But I'm going to use these last few minutes of the podcast, and we'll talk more about this next week or the week after if I survive it, to plug my own 4:48 challenge that I'm doing on Friday, March 4th. So 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. So take everything we've said in the last 20-25 minutes about cycling and swimming and building that up and not doing too much mileage, and we put this challenge in, just throw it straight out the window. So that's the plan, trying to build the miles in the legs and see how they go. But to your point, Rachael, building up to that, I probably will do a bit of brick running just so I can run on tired legs and try and get more cycles in. And I'll be getting on to Eric soon about how not to use my glutes when cycling, especially with hills, because that is one thing we have to talk about soon in the podcast, is using the bike for not only positioning and stuff like that, but also changing gears. I was talking to a friend who like, they couldn't change gears and they had find the right time to change gears, when to sit down, when to stand up and all the rest. And I'm talking my backside because I don't exactly know how to approach that. But I do know the right way, you fly up a hill. The wrong way, you're making it 6-7 times worse for yourself.
Absolutely. Like, getting that gear change right can make you, like you said, fly up the hill, or you might struggle to get started. You're nearly better off turning down the hill, changing your gears, and then attacking it again. We can definitely talk about that. And never stop on a hill, because if you stop on a hill, it's so hard to get started, especially if you're trying to clip in.
I know that's definitely a topic for a future episode of the Any Given Runday podcast. Rachel, it's getting late over there. It's getting early over here. So unless you got anything else to add this week's episode of the show?
No, just again, thanks to everyone for listening. We hope we haven't bored the ear off you yet, but obviously not if you keep coming back.
And here's to the next 100.
Woo! Let's do it.
And on that note, guys, thank you very much for listening to this week's episode of the Any Given Monday podcast. That's it for myself, Eric, and Rachel. Take care.